Before the story begins, don't forget to hit like, drop a comment about your favorite moment, and subscribe so you never miss another HFY tale of humans defying the impossible. Now, let's drop into the fight. The jungle's canopy split open as Commander Rylan Ward stepped into the clearing, boots sinking an inch into soil as black as volcanic glass. Humidity clung to him like a second skin, but his emerald eyes remained sharp, scanning the shadows where things too large to hide still tried. He'd survived ambushes, sieges, and the vacuum tear of a ruptured starship hull. But none of that compared to the presence looming before him now. Gorith Prime stepped out from the drifting fog, each footfall cracking the earth. A towering wall of bone-plated muscle, 6 meters tall, with claws curved like scythes forged for harvesting lives. His voice rolled out like the grinding of tectonic plates. "Kneel, human." Rylan didn't flinch. He rested his hand on the hilt of his survival blade, not because he thought it would kill Gorith, but because it reminded him he wasn't empty-handed. "I only kneel to bury you." Cale Bren, bound at the wrists behind him, let out a strangled laugh. Even battered, bruised, and half-covered in alien dust, Cale could find humor in staring death straight in the gullet. "Rylan, maybe don't antagonize the skyscraper made of knives?" "Too late," Rylan muttered, stepping a half-inch forward, angling his body to shield Cale. Gorith tilted his head, nostrils flaring at the scent of defiance. The Vorkreth surrounding the clearing, warriors with smaller frames but similar bone armor, rumbled in anticipation. They expected a quick, humiliating execution. They expected their alpha to demonstrate absolute dominance. They expected a human to break. Rylan had never been fond of meeting expectations. The creature's red-black eyes narrowed. "You stand alone. You have no pack. No armor. No weapon worthy of my notice. Yet you refuse the command of the Alpha. Why?" Rylan smiled without warmth. "Humans don't kneel. Not to tyrants. Not to beasts. Not to fate." Cale cleared his throat. "Also, he's incredibly stubborn." A low growl rippled through the assembled Vorkreth, but Gorith silenced them with one raised claw. "This arrogance fascinates me. You humans arrive on my world, trespass on my hunting grounds, and still dare to lift your head." His grin exposed rows of serrated teeth. "You will entertain me in combat." Rylan's pulse quickened, but not with fear. This was the opening he needed. A fight meant rules. A fight meant time. A fight meant Cale had a chance to slip free, if Rylan played it right. Rylan raised his chin. "Then let's get it over with." The Alpha's roar shook dust from the treetops. Vorkreth warriors slammed their weapons against their armor, forming a circle as large as a shuttle landing pad. The ground vibrated with ancient ritual energy. This arena had seen countless deaths, none of which concerned Rylan. His focus was on Cale's breathing behind him, steady but strained. As they marched him to the center, Rylan whispered, 10 minutes. When the beast roars loudest, run." Cale's eyes widened. "That's your plan? You against him?" Rylan didn't answer. He didn't need to. Cale knew him well enough to understand. Rylan was betting everything on an opening, a single instant where chaos would favor the bold. The circle snapped shut with a thunderous stomp. Gorith entered from the opposite side, each step timed like the beat of a war drum. Rylan forced his breathing calm, letting adrenaline sharpen instead of drown him. Standing across from him now, Gorith seemed even larger, a living titan carved from armored nightmares. "You will bow," Gorith declared, raising arms coated in jagged bone plates that sparked with friction. "All prey bows." Rylan's voice remained low and steady. "I'm no one's prey." Gorith lunged. The impact cratered the earth where Rylan had stood. He rolled, narrowly avoiding a follow-up strike that split a stone pillar like soft clay. Dust exploded outward, coating everything in a gray haze. The Vorkreth cheered, convinced the human was seconds away from becoming mulch. Rylan darted forward, blade glinting. He slashed at a joint in Gorith's armor, a weak point, but the Alpha moved with terrifying speed, backhanding Rylan across the clearing. Pain flared in Rylan's ribs, but he landed on one knee and pushed up before Gorith closed the distance. "Still standing?" Gorith mocked. "Try harder," Rylan said, wiping blood from his lip. The Alpha roared, a sound that seemed to tear through the jungle itself. Leaves shook loose. Birds fled. Cale tensed behind the ring, muscles coiled, eyes flicking to the guards beside him. Rylan needed just a little more time. One more distraction. One more breath. Gorith charged again, but this time Rylan met him halfway, sliding under a sweeping claw and driving his blade into the underarm joint. The weapon sank maybe half an inch, not much but enough to make Gorth howl in pain and disbelief. The crowd froze. Never in their history had a human drawn blood from an alpha beast. Rylan yanked the blade free and sprinted back, keeping just out of Gorth's reach. The Titan clutched his wounded shoulder, anger twisting his features into something feral. "You hurt me," Gorth hissed. "That's the idea," Rylan replied. Round 2. The alpha's roar eclipsed the sky, Kale's cue. The sound was so enormous that the leaves on nearby branches disintegrated into dust. Kale braced, testing the looseness of the bindings Rylan had subtly weakened earlier. Another second. Another breath. Another. Gorth slammed Rylan into the ground with both hands, cracking the soil beneath him. Rylan's vision blurred, pain stabbing up his spine, but he twisted just enough to avoid a killing strike. The alpha's claws pierced the dirt inches from his face. "Last chance," Gorth snarled. "Kneel." Rylan forced a smile through the blood on his teeth. "I told you. I only kneel to bury you." At that moment, Kale twisted his restraints, and they snapped. A guard turned shocked. Kale drove his heel into the alien's knee, grabbed the fallen spear and braced for the next move. Rylan saw it out of the corner of his eye. Perfect timing. He slammed his knee upward into Gorth's exposed inner arm, forcing the beast back half a step, just enough space for Rylan to roll free and regain his footing. Gorth roared again, angrier, louder, shaking the stone ring. Kale murmured, "There's our distraction." Rylan exhaled, eyes narrowing, muscles coiling for the next exchange. This wasn't just survival. This was the beginning of a reckoning, and the alpha beast had no idea what kind of animal he'd decided to provoke. And high above the arena, the storm clouds rolled in like the galaxy itself leaning in to watch. The shockwave from Gorth's roar rippled through the arena, sending dust spiraling upward in violent corkscrews. Rylan steadied himself, ribs throbbing from the last impact, but his mind remained razor-focused. Pain was familiar territory, predictable, almost comforting. What mattered now was survival, and survival for him always meant finding the angle no one else saw. Gorth circled him slowly, each step deepening the cratered ground. "You think wounding me earns you honor?" the alpha growled, flexing the blood-smeared joint Rylan had cut. "It earns you a slower death." Rylan adjusted his stance, watching the Titan's movements, noting the slight hitch each time Gorth rolled his injured shoulder. "If you knew humans better," he said, "you'd realize I didn't do that for honor." "Then for what?" Gorth demanded. "To buy time." Beyond the ring of bone-armored warriors, Kale had fully broken free from his restraints. He now crouched beside the fallen Vorkreth guard, working rapidly with the scavenged gauntlet he'd stolen. Rylan counted the seconds in his head, making every dodge and counterstrike feel like part of a rehearsed dance. Gorth lunged again, the ground breaking under his charge. Rylan slid sideways, forcing the alpha to pivot hard, pushing his weight onto the injured limb. The beast winced, a fraction, a twitch, but Rylan saw it. The Vorkreth warriors murmured among themselves, confused. The alpha beast was not supposed to feel pain, not from a soft-skinned offworlder. Their culture didn't make room for anomalies, and Rylan had just become one. Gorth snarled and swung both arms outward, a wide sweep meant to flatten the entire area. Rylan jumped back, boots skidding across the dust, staying just beyond lethal reach. "You fight like prey," Gorth mocked. "Always running." "No," Rylan replied, breath steady. "I fight to win." A flicker crossed the alpha's expression, amusement or irritation Rylan couldn't tell. But it told him something vital. Gorth wasn't just a brute. The beast was thinking, calculating. That made him more dangerous but also more predictable. Rylan's mind flashed back to Coral 7, the mining colony where he was raised. He remembered scavenging food in abandoned tunnels after raiders devastated the settlement. He remembered his father teaching him how to survive by analyzing, not reacting. "Strength fades," his father once said. "But strategy stays sharp." And now, in this alien arena, Rylan called on every lesson carved into his bones. Gorth thundered forward again, shaking the earth. Rylan sidestepped and struck, pushing his blade into the same weak point. It sunk deeper this time. The alpha's roar cracked the air. "You dare!" Gorth bellowed. "You insignificant!" Rylan didn't let him finish. He rolled under the massive arm and sprinted to widen the distance. Behind the beast, Kale's improvised gauntlet began to buzz faintly, emitting a charge Rylan could almost feel through the air. Kale whispered, "Just a bit more. Come on." The Vorkreth nearest him finally noticed the escaping human and barked in alarm. Kale pivoted, using the guard's own dropped blade to parry a strike. His movements were sharp, economical. He wasn't the strongest soldier, but he was quick and his mind worked faster than most computers. In moments, he disabled the warrior and aimed the gauntlet toward the center of the ring. Rylan needed to hold the Alpha's attention just a little longer. He shouted, "Is this all the great Alpha beast can manage? I've fought heavy machinery that hit harder." It worked. Gorath's fury flared hot and blinding. The Titan's pupils narrowed as he charged with renewed violence. The ground trembled. Trees outside the arena shed leaves in a trembling cascade. Rylan braced himself, forcing his battered body into one final sprint. The Alpha's shadow swallowed him whole. Rylan dove aside, sweeping his blade across the back of Gorath's knee joint. It didn't cut deep, but it redirected the Titan's momentum. Gorath stumbled, crashing against a stone pillar with enough force to fracture it. That sound, bone armor scraping against stone, echoed like a war drum. Kale shouted, "Now!" The gauntlet discharged. A burst of electromagnetic light detonated across the arena, blinding the Vorkreth and rattling Gorath's senses. The air crackled. Dust turned to ash. Warriors shouted in confusion as their helmets flickered and their limbs spasmed. Rylan, having anticipated the blast, shielded his eyes and dropped low. Gorath staggered backward, disoriented but not defeated. The Alpha's armor absorbed some of the blast, but his equilibrium faltered. The ground under him cracked as he slammed a foot down, trying to regain balance. Kale sprinted toward Rylan, panting. "The EMP bought us seconds, not minutes." "That's enough," Rylan replied, dragging Kale toward the tunnel opening behind the pillars. But escape wasn't clean. The arena's structure, overloaded by the blast, groaned dangerously. Cracks snaked across the floor. A massive stone arch above them shuddered like it was waking from centuries of slumber. Kale glanced up. "We really should move." "We are moving," Rylan grunted. Gorath's vision cleared just in time to spot them slipping into the tunnel. His roar shook loose chunks of stone from the ceiling. "You cannot flee. I decide when prey dies." Rylan didn't look back. "Keep talking," he called. "It makes you easier to find." Kale coughed out a laugh despite the danger. "You really can't help yourself, can you? Not when he's listening." Behind them, the Vorkreth scrambled to recover from the EMP shockwave. Gorath regained full balance, slamming a claw into the arena wall as he launched himself toward the tunnel. His rage was volcanic, his focus absolute. But the collapsing entrance bought the humans a precious window. Rylan and Kale sprinted deeper into the shadows, navigating by instinct and the faint glow of moss along the walls. Their breaths echoed through the ancient subterranean passage. Finally, when the rumbling behind them quieted just enough to suggest temporary safety, Kale leaned against a stone support, catching his breath. "We're alive. Barely." Again. Rylan surveyed the branching tunnels ahead, eyes narrowing with assessment. "He's not finished. He'll follow. And he'll be angrier." Kale nodded shakily. "Which means we need a plan." "Oh, we have one," Rylan said. He pointed toward the distant glow of the deeper caverns. "Down there is how we survive. And how we end this." Far behind them, another roar tore through the tunnels, closer, furious, unstoppable. Their time was running out. The tunnels constricted around them as Rylan and Kale pushed deeper, each step echoing like a countdown in the dark. The air thickened with moisture and the faint metallic odor of old blood. Every so often, a tremor rippled through the stone, the unmistakable signal that Gorath was forcing his massive frame through the winding passages behind them. Kale wiped sweat from his brow, his voice low. "He's closing in. I can feel it through the floor." Rylan didn't slow. "Good. The tighter the tunnels get, the harder it'll be for him to maneuver. Gives us a chance." "That's your definition of a chance?" Kale muttered. "A giant monster getting stuck in a hallway? If it works, we walk out alive." They emerged into a vast chamber lit by bluish bioluminescent veins threading through the walls like lightning trapped in stone. The space opened into terraces carved by ancient hands or claws. Rylan couldn't tell which. The cavern smelled of damp earth and something faintly sweet, almost floral. Kale exhaled in awe. "This is something else." Rylan scanned the expanse, alert. Vorkreth territory. Probably an old hatchery or gathering hall. "Stay sharp." Their footfalls carried them between towering pillars formed from fused bones. Embedded in some of them were claw marks that suggested battles long past, scars left by titans like Gorath. Rylan studied the floor, dusty but disturbed, with small tracks leading deeper inside. Then a shape stepped from behind a pillar. Rylan tensed, blade drawn before the figure fully emerged. It was a young Vorkreth warrior, slimmer than the others they'd faced, still covered in bone plating but less rigid, less grown. His eyes flickered with uncertainty, not aggression. Kale whispered, "You want me to shoot?" "No," Rylan said without lowering the blade. "He's alone." The young warrior raised his hands slowly, claws sheathed. "You spared me earlier," he said in a rasping accent. "I repay debt. Tunnel behind you, death. Alpha comes." Kale blinked. "Well, that's unusually helpful." Rylan's grip tightened. "Why warn us?" The youth's throat pulsed. "Alpha breaks the old laws. Strength rules, yes, but honor binds. He hunts you not for clan but ego." Rylan nodded slowly. "And that bothers you. Vorkreth follow truth of battle, not madness." The youth hesitated. "You fight with mind. With purpose. Different. Dangerous." Kale offered a tired smile. "That's humans for you." Before more could be said, a thunderous boom reverberated through the cavern. Dust rained from the ceiling. Gorith had forced his way into the tunnel behind them, and the tremors he produced now were stronger, angrier, closer. The young Vorkreth backed away. "I cannot fight him. But I can choose not to stop you." "That's enough," Rylan said. "Go." The youth vanished into a side crevice just as the tunnel behind them exploded open. Gorith tore through the stone like a living battering ram, fragments crashing down around him. His glowing eyes locked onto Rylan immediately. "You run," the Alpha snarled, voice amplified by the chamber. "You hide. You bleed hope into the earth. But you cannot escape me." Rylan motioned to Kale. "Move." They sprinted across the cavern, dodging bone pillars as Gorith stormed after them. The Titan's footsteps shattered stalagmites, his claws tore trenches through the ground. The tremors nearly knocked Kale off his feet. "Rylan." Kale panted. "You said we had a plan. Tell me we still have one." Rylan pointed toward an archway at the far end, where a faint wind stirred dust into spiraling patterns. "That tunnel leads out of the nest. If we reach the cliff, we can lose him." "Lose him?" Kale barked incredulously. "We can barely outrun him." "We won't outrun him," Rylan said. "We'll outplay him." Gorith roared, the force of it shuddering through the cavern and nearly pitching them forward. Rylan grabbed Kale's arm to keep him upright. Behind them, pillars toppled, crashing like thunder as the Alpha plowed through them. They reached the archway and burst into a narrow passage lined with razor-edged rock formations. These walls were jagged, unpredictable, dangerous. "Perfect." Kale slid under a fallen slab while Rylan vaulted it. "This path is insane," Kale gasped. "Even for us." "It's a bottleneck," Rylan replied. "He's too big to maneuver well. It slows him down." "And if it doesn't?" Rylan glanced back. Gorith had wedged himself through the entrance, bone armor scraping sparks against stone, rage amplifying every movement. "Then we improvise," Rylan said. They sprinted until the path suddenly widened into an open ledge. Rain-scented wind blasted their faces. Below them, a sweeping chasm plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the faint shimmer of stormlight filtering through cracks above. Kale stared into the abyss. "Rylan, tell me you're not thinking." Rylan stepped to the edge, examining the broken stone bridge jutting over the drop. Its surface tilted downward, cracked but sturdy enough for one desperate maneuver. "We jump," he said simply. Kale's voice climbed an octave. "Jump? Jump where?" "Into that. It's either that or Gorith tears us apart." Kale looked back. Gorith crashed through the last of the stone, emerging fully onto the ledge. His fury was incandescent. "Human," the Alpha roared. "Your bones will mark this place." Rylan grabbed Kale's wrist. "Trust me." "You have terrible ideas," Kale muttered. "But they work." Rylan stepped back, measured the distance, and sprinted toward the broken bridge. Gorith lunged with a sound like a collapsing mountain, but the humans were already airborne, leaping into the echoing void, swallowed by wind and darkness. Above them, Goritha's roar shook the chasm walls, the promise of pursuit echoing down into the abyss. Rylan angled their fall toward the faint outline of a lower ledge, heart-pounding, vision narrowed to one goal: survive the drop, regroup, outsmart the Titan. Kale screamed, "If we die, I'm haunting you." Rylan tightened his grip. "We're not dying today." The wind howled around them as the abyss swallowed their descent, the cliff face racing upward like a stone fist. And far above, Goritha's silhouette leaned over the edge, watching, waiting, determined to finish the hunt. The breach alarms shrieked through the comms, a jagged tone that stabbed straight through Eric's skull as he sprinted down the shattered corridor. Tarek kept pace despite his half-mended wounds, the warbeasts breathing sharp and rhythmic like a forge bellows. Sparks cascaded from torn conduits, shadows jittering across the walls as the station groaned under external pressure. The Alpha had arrived. Eric knew before sensors confirmed it. The instinctive chill spreading through Tarek's hide was enough. The warbeast's spines lifted, and his pupils narrowed to predatory slits. The air thickened, charged with an ancient rivalry Eric only now understood in its full, terrible scope. The Alpha didn't want the station. He wanted the one traitor who had defied him and the human foolish, or brave, enough to stand beside that traitor. They reached the observation deck overlooking docking ring 7 just in time to see reality ripple. Space folded like a fabric caught in a hurricane. Then, with a concussion that cracked the station's outer plating, the Titan-class dread transport punched through. The Alpha's flagship. Its silhouette was unmistakable, massive, savage, all jagged armor plates and runic scars etched from 100 conquests. Tarek winced at the sight, muscles trembling in reflexive submission before he forced them still. Eric saw the struggle and placed a hand on the warbeast's arm. "Look at me." Tarek's gaze shifted, molten gold to steady human blue. "You're not kneeling today," Eric said quietly. "Not to him. Not again." Tarek breathed once. A vow sealed without words. The dread transport deployed boarding spikes. Massive, spear-like thrusters that shot out and rammed into the station hull. The impact shook the deck under their feet. Bulkheads shuddered. Emergency lights flared crimson. The Alpha's warriors surged through the breaches. 2 meters tall. Armor grown from their own bones. Eyes burned with predatory hunger. But they didn't roar. They marched. The silence was worse than any battle cry. "They're not here for a fight," Tarek muttered. "They're here for a ceremony." Eric didn't like the sound of that at all. They retreated from the observation deck and sealed the blast door. Eric checked his rifle, though he knew bullets wouldn't shift the outcome here. This conflict had always been more personal than tactical. Tarek flexed his claws, the faint tremor gone, replaced by a lethal, focused calm. "If he reaches us," Tarek said, "he will invoke the right of dominion. It ends only with death or submission." "Then we choose option 3, Eric said. Tarek blinked. "There is no option 3. There is when I'm here." The warbeast looked at him for a long moment. And some of the fear, the guilt, the shame carved into him by years under the Alpha's rule, eased. The door behind them boomed. "What?" Twice. Metal warped inward. Tarek moved to the front, but Eric grabbed his arm. "Hold. Make him come in believing you're still afraid." Tarek nodded slowly. His spines relaxed. Shoulders lowered. Breath steadied. He looked, for all appearances, like the subordinate the Alpha expected. The blast door tore open. Then he filled the room. The Alpha stepped through, towering above even Tarek by half a meter. His mane of sharpened quills radiated dominance. His voice was a low, resonant growl that vibrated the very floor. "Tarek. Kneel." The command rolled through the air, not spoken but projected, an instinctual pressure meant to crush lesser wills. Tarek stiffened as it hit him. His legs trembled as if pulled by invisible chains. Eric stepped forward. A human. Smaller, unarmored, defiant. The Alpha's eyes narrowed. "You presume to stand between a sovereign and his broken pet?" Eric ignored the insult. "He's not kneeling." The Alpha took one heavy step forward. His presence pressed like a physical force against Eric's bones. "Human, you misunderstand. He is not offered a choice." Eric's voice stayed steady. "That's where you're wrong." The Alpha turned his attention back to Tarek and spoke the command again, harsher, sharper, the room vibrating under the force of it. "Kneel." Tarek's legs buckled, but Eric slammed his hand onto the warbeast's shoulder, anchoring him, not with strength but with purpose. "You kneel," Eric whispered, only to bury him. Tarek's eyes snapped open, golden and blazing, not with fear but fury long denied. The Alpha felt the shift. He snarled. Tarek rose to his full height, no longer trembling, no longer bound by instinct or history. He bared his fangs. "I choose my own dominion." The Alpha lunged. Tarek countercharged. Eric dove out of the clash as 2 apex predators collided like meteor impacts, their roars shaking the entire deck. Steel buckled. Lights shattered. The air vibrated with primal violence. For the first time the Alpha did not push Tarek backward. The warbeast held. Eric saw the opening. He surged up, grabbed a fallen boarding spear, and drove it into the Alpha's exposed flank with a shout that tore his throat raw. The Alpha howled, staggering. Tarek seized Eric's momentum and slammed the Alpha through a reinforced support column, leaving the tyrant dazed and bleeding. Yet the Alpha was far from defeated. He rose slowly, eyes glowing with incandescent rage, wounded pride more than wounded flesh. "You dare," the Alpha whispered. Eric met his gaze. "You have no idea what humans dare." The Alpha's answering smile was cold, vicious, and hungry. "So be it. You've earned the right to die on your feet." He spread his arms as if welcoming a storm. "And I will show this galaxy why my rule is eternal." Eric tightened his grip on the spear. Tarek shifted into a stance Eric had never seen. Predator and protector fused into one. The Alpha advanced. And the stage was set for a reckoning that would reshape more than a single throne. It would redraw the hierarchy of predators in the universe. And none of them intended to kneel. Ryland's chest heaved as the stormlight cut across the cliff face, the wind lashing rain into his eyes. Below, the chasm yawned like an endless void, the shadows hiding every jagged stone and twisted root. Kale gritted his teeth, clutching a broken shard of Vorkreth armor, and took a cautious step behind him. For the first time, both men felt the weight of the battle, the looming presence of an apex predator that had already shredded forests and shattered stone. Gorth Prime was alive, and he was coming. The Titan emerged from the mist, each step crushing trees and boulders, his bone-plated armor glinting with rainwater. His roar split the air, vibrating deep into the human bones that had grown accustomed to the wild ferocity of alien worlds. Yet this time Ryland didn't flinch. Not because he wasn't afraid, but because he had decided fear would not dictate the outcome. This was his moment, not Gorith's. Kale whispered, "We can't outrun him. Not across this terrain." Ryland shook his head. "We don't need to outrun him. We just need to control the battlefield." His eyes swept the cliffside, analyzing every overhang, every slick vine, every loose rock. "We fight smart or we die stupid. And I don't intend to die stupid." Gorith bellowed again, charging forward, claws gouging the earth, the roar echoing like a rolling avalanche. Ryland took a deep breath, lunging to the side and pulling Kale behind a fallen tree trunk that splintered into jagged shards under the force of the Titan's strike. Each moment was calculated. The slope of the cliff, the tension in the vines above, the weight distribution of Gorith's massive frame. Humans were fragile, yes, but fragile didn't mean predictable. Ryland gestured to Kale. "Now." Kale activated the hacked Vorkreth gauntlet, sending arcs of electricity up into the nearest overhanging branches. The storm combined with the charge, creating a cascading shower of lightning that struck the cliffside. Gorith howled, jerking his massive frame backward as vines and roots crackled, tension snapping like crossbows in the wind. Ryland had bought a few precious seconds, enough to lead the Titan into the kill zone. The ground beneath Gorith gave slightly, a natural pit hidden by dense moss and slippery stone. Ryland dashed, keeping just ahead of the staggering Alpha, leading him toward the edge. "Watch your footing," Kale shouted, dodging debris hurled by the beast's flailing claws. Gorith stumbled, massive weight pitching forward, and tumbled into the concealed pit with a deafening crash. Dust and splintered wood filled the air, the impact reverberating across the cliffside. For a heartbeat, the Titan lay still, struggling to right himself. Then Ryland stepped closer, blade raised, adrenaline sharp as the wind whipping rain into his eyes. "You can roar all you want," Ryland said, voice steady despite his battered body. "I'm not kneeling. I'm not begging. I'm ending this." Gorith rose, fury burning in every fiber of his immense frame. The Alpha's eyes narrowed, locking onto the human who had dared defy him repeatedly. He lunged with lethal precision, claws extended, teeth bared in a grin of pure malice. Ryland sidestepped, driving the shard of armor he had carried like a spear into Gorith's exposed flank. The bone plates splintered, sparks flying. The Alpha roared, staggering, a sound of rage and disbelief. He had never been challenged like this, not by a single human, not by anything that thought instead of only striking. Kale leapt forward, slashing with an energy blade he had scavenged from the arena's debris. Sparks arced as his strike connected with Gorith's damaged armor, forcing the Titan back. Tarek's lessons had taught them both that brute force could not win against a creature this size. Strategy, cunning, and timing were the weapons that now stood between life and death. Gorith steadied himself, but his movements were slower, more calculated, weighed down by injury and the electric feedback surging through the vines and shattered gauntlet. Ryland saw the opening he had predicted. The Alpha's confidence had become a vulnerability. He ran, jumping onto a jagged outcrop, blade poised, and drove the shard deep into Gorith's chest, aiming for the joint beneath the rib-like armor. The Titan staggered, bellowing, claws scraping against stone in desperation. Rylan kept his footing, heart hammering, rain plastering hair and mud to his skin. He could feel every strike, every movement, the raw pulse of power in Gorith, and he met it with calm, deliberate precision. Kale flanked the Alpha from the side, slashing at the weak points Rylan had marked. Gorith swung wildly, missing each strike as the two humans exploited the terrain, the storm, and his rage. Finally, with a final roar that echoed into the chasm below, Gorith stumbled, collapsing into the jagged rocks. The pit that had once concealed him now held the Titan pinned, unable to rise without exposing himself further to the human's attack. Rylan stood above him, rain and sweat streaking his face. "I told you," he said, voice cutting through the storm, "I only kneel to bury you." With one final motion he drove the shard upward with all his strength, piercing the Alpha's core. Gorith's roar became a strangled hiss, his massive body trembling before going still. Kale exhaled sharply, leaning against a rock. "We did it," he muttered, disbelief and exhaustion mixed into one ragged breath. Rylan's eyes scanned the chasm, finally resting on the distant horizon where the first dropships of the human fleet pierced through the storm clouds. Reinforcements had arrived, drawn by the beacon Kale had activated earlier. The galaxy had watched, and now it would see what humans were capable of. The young Vorkreth warrior they had spared appeared at the edge of the cliff, bowing not in submission but in recognition. Others followed, emerging from the shadows and debris, cautious but attentive. Humanity had broken the cycle of fear. The apex predator had fallen not through sheer force alone, but through intelligence, courage, and defiance. Kale clapped Rylan on the shoulder, laughter and relief mingling. "Next time, maybe we take a vacation instead of hunting titans?" Rylan smirked, chest still heaving. "There won't be a next time unless the universe underestimates humans again. And it probably will." Above, storm clouds began to break, letting streaks of sunlight cut through. Rylan looked at the horizon, at the fleet approaching, at the kneeling, but not submissive, Vorkreth. "Let the galaxy see," he murmured, voice low and steady, "humans do not kneel." For the first time silence replaced the roar, and in that silence victory felt like breathing, deep, full, and alive. The apex predator had fallen, but the legend of the humans who refused to kneel had only begun.